Investing in a sustainable future has become a priority for many investors, but there's a growing concern that many companies are not as green as they claim to be. According to Morningstar's 2023 Voice of the Asset Owner survey, 67% of asset managers say ESG has become more material to investment policy. But while sustainability and climate are increasingly important focus areas for investors, there's also growing concern about greenwashing. According to data from Morningstar Sustainalytics Low Carbon Transition Ratings, 91% of companies are not on track to meet their stated greenhouse gas reduction targets. In this video, we'll be looking at one tool that investors can leverage to mitigate their greenwashing risks: high-quality data. We'll look at 3 signals that a company may be engaging in greenwashing and the types of data investors can use to get better insight into a company's real progress on their sustainability goals. One of the most common ways companies inflate their sustainability progress is by setting long-term, highly ambitious carbon reduction targets, but then failing to take action, or failing to invest in the changes needed to meet those future commitments. In fact, some studies have shown that as much as 72% of firms have not reduced emissions enough to meet their committed targets. To address this aspect of greenwashing, investors need data that looks beyond a company's stated reduction targets and helps them evaluate the actions and investments that a company is making to meet those targets. To tell us more, we're joined by Alicia White, Senior Product Manager, Climate Solutions.
Many companies have pledged to reduce their carbon emissions to net zero by 2050 or sooner, in line with the 1.5-degree target of the Paris Agreement. But when we dig deeper into the data on how companies are actually building the governance structures and processes to achieve these goals, there's often significant misalignment. And one way we can measure this is to look at a company's implied temperature rise, or ITR. This is a metric that tells us how much the world would warm if every company had the same investment alignment and transition preparedness as the company we're analyzing. So let's take a large food and beverage company as an example. They've committed to reach net zero by 2040, 10 years ahead of the Paris Agreement deadline. But is their commitment actually backed by concrete actions and plans? According to the company's stated actions and their projected emissions, the answer is no. The company's implied temperature rise is 3.9 degrees Celsius, which means that if all companies followed their example, the world would warm by almost 4 degrees above pre-industrial levels, and this would have catastrophic consequences for the planet. Investors can use this data to help them assess the climate performance and alignment of the companies, portfolios, funds, and indexes that they're investing in to ensure that they're as green as they claim to be. They can also use the data to set decarbonization targets, support engagement on climate risk, and identify the potential financial impacts of climate change on their investments.
Another way that many companies can skirt responsibility and transparency on their environmental impact is by ignoring their Scope 3 emissions. According to Morningstar Sustainalytics emissions data published in March 2023, on average, Scope 3 emissions make up 60% of a company's total carbon footprint. However, because they're the result of activities and assets not directly owned or controlled by a company, they are also the most difficult to track and report on. As a result, they often get left out of corporate sustainability reports. But when companies only address their Scope 1 and 2 emissions, they're leaving out a big piece of the puzzle. Here's Alicia again to tell us more.
Data on how a company is managing their Scope 3 emissions can help investors avoid greenwashing by providing a more comprehensive and transparent picture of the company's environmental impact and performance. The best Scope 3 data will take into consideration both upstream emissions, or those from the supply chain, and downstream emissions, or emissions from how a product is used. So let's return to our food and beverage company as an example. Here, we can see that their Scope 3 upstream emissions accounts for over 85% of the company's overall emissions profile, and that before taking into account any management policies, they would overshoot their net zero budget by over 2,000%. We also see that their stated management actions only manage away almost 24% of that overshoot. And this means that a significant portion of their total emissions are unmanaged, making them severely misaligned with their own net zero ambitions.
But Scope 3 emissions aren't the only metric companies often emit. They may also provide incomplete or vague information in their disclosures regarding their vulnerability to physical climate risks. These are the potential damages and losses to property due to the physical consequences of climate change. Misleading disclosures regarding physical climate risks can take many forms. Often, they involve the use of selective information to create a more favorable impression of a company's resilience to climate change.
One of the most common ways that companies might mislead investors is by downplaying the severity of the risks that they face, or by omitting specific details about those risks. Let's take a large agricultural company as an example. They might make public commitments and acknowledge climate change as a general risk factor in disclosure documents, but then they might fail to provide specific details about how the changing weather patterns, such as prolonged droughts or extreme heat events, could impact its crop yields. Data about the physical climate risks companies face can help clarify just how significant of an impact climate can have on a company's bottom line. For example, we can look at data for direct and indirect damage losses. Direct losses are those derived from a combination of asset damage risk and productive capacity loss. And indirect losses are derived from the losses to the local critical infrastructure, for example, damage to surrounding energy grids. For our example agricultural company, even in a more conservative scenario where temperature rise stays below 2 degrees, we can see that they could be facing over 1 billion USD in direct losses and over 175 million USD in indirect losses between now and 2050. Projections and data like this help investors make more informed decisions about their overall exposure to climate risks.
As scrutiny around greenwashing continues to grow, investors must remain on guard in the face of significant risks to their portfolios. Recognizing and combating greenwashing is not only an ethical imperative, it's also a strategic necessity for safeguarding investment portfolios against hidden risks. By leveraging the right data points, investors can ensure they are making informed decisions to ensure the long-term resilience and success of their investments. Thanks for watching. To learn more about how our data can help you mitigate your greenwashing risks, visit the Sustainalytics website or book a call with an advisor today to learn more about our low carbon transition ratings and physical climate risk metrics. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next part of this video series.